Hello guys, in this chapter, I will take you through the theory on friction, module 6 of engineering science N2. This chapter is divided into the following topics. There are important terms, principles, advantages, disadvantages, and ways of reducing friction. Number 3, there are calculations based on horizontal planes. There are calculations based on inclined planes. Important terms. You must be able to define the general definition of a friction. It is the resistance between the surfaces that are in contact. But here we're going to calculate a frictional force. A frictional force is a force that opposes or resists a motion or possible motion. So if you have an object and you apply force on an object, whether it is moving or not moving, there will be a friction involved. So I'm going to take you through or give you the definition of the types of friction. What type of friction exists when the object is stationary, and what type of friction exists when the object is in motion. A coefficient of friction. The symbol that we use for a coefficient of friction will be mu. It is the ratio between frictional force and the normal reaction force. So a coefficient of friction will be dimensionless because frictional force is measured in newtons as well as the normal reaction is in newtons. So the units cancel out. Types of friction. There is static friction as well as the kinetic friction. A static friction is defined as the maximum friction taking place just before an object starts moving on the plane, or is a force required to set the block in motion, or it is the friction or is the force that is needed to keep the object at rest. So when the object is at rest, the type of friction that exists is called a static friction. Kinetic friction. The symbol that is used to calculate kinetic friction is F mu K. But the symbol for the coefficient of kinetic friction is only mu K. Symbol for static friction is F mu S. But the symbol for coefficient of static friction will be mu and the subscript S. Kinetic friction is the friction which takes place if an object slides across the bearing surface at a constant speed, or is a force that is needed to keep the block in motion. So kinetic friction keep the object at rest. Kinetic friction keep the object in motion, whereas the static friction keep the object at rest. If you apply a force on an object, let's say it's a force of 5 Newton and the object doesn't move, it means there's a friction that is keeping it at rest, and the name of that friction is called the static friction. When the object starts to move, it is easier for an object to slide across the bearing when the static friction has been overcome, and you can reduce the force. The name of the friction that exists is called the kinetic friction. When it is in motion, is needed to keep the block in motion. Okay, the principle and the ways of reducing the friction. Principle is also called the law of friction. Friction depends on the nature of the surface, whether it is smooth or it is rough. It is influenced by the nature. If a surface is rough, there is more friction. If the surface is smooth, there is less friction. Second principle, friction does not depend on the slip speed. So it is independent of the slip speed, is not influenced by the slip speed. What influences it is the nature of the surface. Number 3, friction does not depend on the size of the area in contact. So it is not influenced by the size of area in contact, is independent of it, but it is influenced by the nature. It depends on the nature. The last one, friction is proportional to the perpendicular force between the surface, which that is the normal force. The more you increase the applied force, the more the normal force will also increase if the object is still at rest. The ways of reducing friction. You can machine the contact surface to a smooth finish. You can add lubrication. You can ensure that part fit properly. Advantages and disadvantages. Advantages are the friction removes material itchy when using the sandpaper. Number 2, friction enables us to walk on the floor. Number 3, friction brings moving machinery to standstill. Number 4, friction between the tires of the car and the road enables forward movement. And the disadvantage of friction are it causes wear and tear. It generates unwanted heat. Friction has retarding effect on moving parts. If you still remember the term retardation from Module 1, retardation is the negative acceleration. So friction is a tendency of slowing down the objects. And due to that friction, more power is required to maintain the movement. So this is the theory, or this is what you can expect in friction. In exam, this chapter contributes 11% to 12% of it. So there is theory plus the calculations. Calculations are based on a horizontal surface as well as on inclined planes. So I will post the video on horizontal plane and the inclined plane. Thank you.